We are just a few days away from the first day of fall, and I had several more DIYs that I wanted to share with you guys. Thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace. I'm Alicia. Welcome back to my viewers that come and see me each week, and hello if you are new here. Please give today's video a thumbs up if you enjoy the content, and let's get started with these fall DIYs. I had one of these carving pumpkins in my stash. I actually picked up a couple of these earlier in the season and I used one for another project. And I just cut this one in half and it worked best for me just using one of my old serrated knives that I have in the kitchen and just following that line that's already there in the pumpkin. And you can just easily pop out that stem piece because it's just attached with a toothpick. And then I did just one good coat of my Waverly chalk paint in the color pumpkin. I did have to go back in and do some touch-ups in just a few areas, but I got really good coverage with this paint. I just didn't like that really bright shiny orange color for this project. And you will also need either a picture frame or you can use one of these round mirrors that I found at the Dollar Tree. It worked great for this other than the filming part. I couldn't figure out how to do this without you guys seeing my face or my camera just a little bit. And I just removed the plastic from this and removed the backing and just saved those screws and the hardware for this. Of course, I will be putting it back together. And you will also need one of the adhesive tile pieces that you can find at Dollar Tree. And I just used the mirror portion of that to trace out a circle and just cut that out. And I used some of my Aleene's tacky glue just to attach that faux tile piece to the top of the mirror. And I love using this faux tile because of all of the details that you have in that. And I think this pattern has a very vintage and antique vibe. And of course I wanted to paint this, so I used my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. And this did take a couple of coats just to get all of that blue color covered up. And you want to be careful when you are painting this faux tile because it does have a lot of ridges and things. And then it's a little bit challenging just to get your paint smooth on there. And while that tile piece was drying, I do go back and work on my pumpkin piece a little bit. I wanted to add a little bit of dimension and detail to this, so I just took that same paintbrush that I had painted this with and did kind of a light dry brushing in each of those segments just with some antique wax. And I kind of buffed that in a little bit so it wasn't so harsh and dark, and I just used a baby wipe to do that. And I also just took what antique wax was left on that brush and just did a light dry brushing across the entire surface of this. That just makes all of those bumps and details stand out on your pumpkin. And I love this antique gold rub and buff. I think this just adds a very antique vintage feel to any of your decor pieces that you might be creating. So I like to use just an old rag that I have, and I just keep that in a sandwich bag in my craft room and just add a very small amount of your rub and buff and just go over all of your faux tile. And this just makes all of that detail pop and stand out. And I think it is absolutely gorgeous. Isn't that pretty, you guys? I love this gold color. That's one of my favorites in the Rub and Buff brand. And I also wanted my frame to match, so I did just kind of a light, not really dry brushing. I just rubbed that lightly across the surface of my frame just so that would match and coordinate well with my background. And I just reassembled my mirror portion. I tried to make certain that I got all of the holes lined up correctly. That was a little bit challenging. It was hard to see, and the tile piece wasn't exactly flush with that mirror, so I just had to kind of scoot that around a little bit to be able to get my screws back in place and hold everything together. And when I placed my pumpkin down on the top of my decor piece, I thought it was just a little bit too big. It looked just a little odd to me. So I decided to cut off another section of my pumpkin. This was probably about, I don't know, maybe an inch slice. And I thought that looked a lot better once I had that cut off. It just fit better and looked more cohesive with what I was going for. And I just used some hot glue to attach my pumpkin half to my decor piece. And I went outside and just found some of the larger stems and things that we had in our yard. I picked a couple because I wasn't exactly sure which one would work the best for this. So I just used this piece and kind of measured it on the top of my pumpkin before I glued it down, and just trimmed that off a little bit more and attached that to the top with some hot glue. And I had picked up several different florals and greenery from Dollar Tree. This eucalyptus one. I also have some berries, and I had a little thing of pine cones as well, some sunflowers, and just some boxwood in my stash. So I just cut those down into smaller pieces, and I started by adding just a piece of greenery to the top of my pumpkin. I thought this would just look like the leaves that you would see on the pumpkin vines. And then I just started placing all of my greenery picks and floral picks, whatever I had cut down, in areas that I thought they would look the best. I started with the eucalyptus in the back first. There's really no rhyme or reason when I do my florals and things. I just put them in the places that I think they look the best. And the more you practice working with florals and greenery, the better that you get at this, and it's just a little bit easier. But I just put everything in where I wanted it. And this is a smaller piece, so I didn't add a whole lot because I just didn't think that it would look right. And I love adding those little pine cones there on the side and a couple of the berries. And just trim down your picks as you go if you need to. And then I just pulled out a few at a time and added some hot glue and just put those back. This just makes sure that everything will stay in place and nothing will fall out. And I added just one more pine cone there on the top of my pumpkin near the stem on that green leaf. And this is just a piece of scrap drop cloth that I have in my stash. I wanted to add a cute little tag to this decor piece. So I just cut down a smaller strip and then cut that in half. I just wanted to see what size I would need, what would look the best for this project. Just dovetailed the end. And then I just pulled off some of those extra threads just to fray those edges and of course give it that farmhouse feel. I have this crocodile in my craft room. It's one of my favorite tools that I have on hand, and I also picked up this set of different colored grommets. Both of these will be linked in the description box if you guys want to add something useful to your craft room. And I just picked the orange one because I thought that would coordinate well with this project, and I did have to use just a little bit of hot glue to hold that in place while I used the crocodile to attach it to my fabric tag. And I decided to use a fine tip Sharpie to add my text to my tag. You could use iron-on vinyl, stamps, whatever that you have, stickers, whatever that you want to use for this project. I just thought this would be easier for me. My stamps that I have were a little bit too big for this, so this is just what I decided to do for this project. And I just took a small piece of jute twine and tied a knot in that, and I just placed that on the stem on my pumpkin. I didn't even glue that part down because it fit well over the back of that and was very secure. And I did add just a couple of dots of hot glue just to tack down my tag so it would lay the way that I wanted it to. And this project is finished. I just love all of the different elements on this and the different textures. I think this one turned out absolutely gorgeous. Let me know what you guys think about this project. I recently discovered this website called Antique Farmhouse. This is dangerous, you guys. I wanted everything that I saw on there. They had such pretty things, and of course, it is totally my style with all of the farmhouse decor. And I found these really pretty set of acorns. These were oversized golden acorn accent set. You got 4 of those for $42. So I challenged myself to create these using Dollar Tree supplies. So I picked up some of these mini plastic bowls as well as the champagne flutes. I thought these were the perfect shape for acorns, and I don't have a lot of acorns in my decor, so I thought this would be something fun to add this year. So I will be making 3 of these, and I thought those champagne flutes were put together, but they weren't. They had the like stand portion as well as the cup portion separated in the packaging. And when I put these together, I noticed that these did not fit exactly the way that I wanted them to. That bowl was just going too far down into that champagne glass. So the remedy for that, I used some of my Model Magic, and I just took a small piece and rolled that out into a snake, and I just wrapped that around the top of the bowl on this project. You just want to make sure that you roll out enough that it's going to fit all the way around the bowl, the top of that. And it's hard to get this to stick at first, but if you just press that down and just work all the way around the top of your bowl, you kind of just want to press and hold, just working with both of your thumbs and your index fingers. And I did kind of pinch this over the top as well. I guess you guys can see that a little bit better than I can explain it. I thought this would just help hold that clay onto this bowl a little better until it dried. I didn't use any glue for this part. I just thought pinching that over, kind of like you would a pie crust, would hold that in place. And I did just put the champagne glass on the top just to make sure that that would fit the way I wanted it to. I didn't want a lot of that clay showing underneath the acorn cap part. And once I had all of my clay on all of my bowls, I just put the champagne glass back on top, and I marked with a Sharpie where I want to cut this off. I started with maybe about an inch there, and I just got this heat knife to keep in my craft room, and this is a game changer, you guys. This cut through this plastic like butter. This will be great for foam board and other projects where I'm using plastic and want to cut those down. Of course, be very careful with this. It is very hot and very sharp. And then I went back with some of my Model Magic clay to make the stems for my acorn caps, and I did not like the way that that looked, you guys. I just thought they looked more like a pumpkin stem on there because they were really wide at the bottom. I tried to keep shaping this until I was happy with it and just playing around with that clay until I liked the shape of this stem, but I did not like the way that this looked. Especially when I put that top back on the bottom, it just looked like, well, that one looked like a nightcap or something that you would see somebody wear maybe, but it just looked too much like a pumpkin. I even trimmed it off and tried to do it that way. I just did not like the way that that looked. So I pulled that clay back off, and then I just took my heat knife once again, and I just cut that top portion completely off to the bottom. And then I took another piece of my Model Magic clay, and I actually put this up through the bottom of my glass, and that just helped me to press this out on the underside and get that secured that way. And then I was able to shape and form my stem until I was happy with it and thought that it would actually, it looked more like an acorn cap instead of a pumpkin or an apple. And I did make sure to press that clay firmly on the underside of my glass just so I would have that in place. And then to attach my acorn cap to the acorn body, I used some E6000 as well as some hot glue. And I just put my cap on top of my acorn, and I did go around the rim of that and made sure all of that clay was kind of pushed up under the cap. And then I have some of this Krylon Fusion spray paint, and this is the Hammered Cocoa Brown. And I took these outside, and this just took one coat of spray paint to get the coverage that I needed. And I used my Antique Gold Rub and Buff to get that metallic finish on the bottom, like we saw in the inspiration. And I just rubbed that on with my cloth, and I wasn't able to get that up underneath the acorn cap the way I wanted to, so I just used a Q-tip and just took some more of that Rub and Buff and applied that right under the rim so I would get that gold color there as well. And that is it for this project, you guys, and I will show you again here what the inspiration looked like, and here are how mine turned out. Let me know what you guys think about this idea. I think it turned out really beautiful for Dollar Tree products. I've had several canvases just hanging out in my closet for quite some time now, so I pulled one of those out to start this project. And I also had some of these square dowel rods. I get these from Hobby Lobby, and I just took one of those and made some marks all along each edge of my canvas. This is just a guide for me when I start working on my design. And I also measured the size in between each of those marks so I would know the surface area that I had to work with. And of course, you don't have to use a canvas that's this large. It's just what I had on hand. You could pick up some of the smaller ones that they have at Dollar Tree. And once I had my measurements and everything marked out, I went into Cricut Design Space and I found several cut files of leaves that I really liked, as well as a fall saying, and I put that in on my rectangle that I had applied to my canvas in Design Space. This just allowed me to get everything where I wanted it to and get all of the sizing correct. And I did have to resize this just a little bit so it would fit on my mat. And I just cut out my design on some permanent vinyl. And I just weeded that out and used some of my transfer tape to apply that to my canvas. And I made sure that my design was inside all of my marks that I had made on my canvas previously. And even though I did use permanent vinyl, it was still a little hard to get this to stick to that canvas. I don't know what it is. I guess it's just the finish on the front part of that canvas. It makes it a little bit difficult, and I didn't want to put any Mod Podge or anything like that that you can do to help canvas, or not canvas, vinyl stick to things. I didn't want to interfere with the paint or anything like that. I was afraid Mod Podge might not look too good under my paint that I'm going to be applying to this. So I just had to work kind of slowly and use my fingernail to help apply all of that vinyl to my canvas, and just repeated those steps with my fall saying. And I know you guys have probably seen the reverse canvas where you take that off of the frame and then just maybe do some iron-on vinyl or something like that. This is a little different take on that. I wanted to try something different that I have never done before. And once I had all of my vinyl applied, I did go in with just some plain white acrylic paint, and I went over the entire surface of my canvas as well as all of that vinyl. This kind of served two purposes for me. I knew this would help that vinyl stick and adhere a little bit better to that canvas, and hopefully prevent my paint from bleeding underneath all of my design. And it also just helped me visually. And I just picked out several different colors of acrylic paint that I had in my paint stash, a blue and different colors of yellow and a pink. And I also went back and pulled a red ochre color. I just thought all of these would look well as sunset colors. And I am a little bit rusty on painting. I like to say I went through my Bob Ross phase several years ago. I did a lot of paintings then and watched a lot of his videos. Of course, I never used the oil paints and things like he did. I've always just used acrylics. But I wanted to get my stuff out again. It's just very relaxing for me. I just like to put that paint on the canvas. I'm not going to try to explain my technique, you guys. I think I'm just going to let you watch and enjoy some music while I do this. I will say that I use the same paintbrush throughout this entire process, and I like to do just back and forth X's kind of while I am applying each color. Have you guys ever painted on canvas like this before? I do change my brush into a round, smaller brush to do my clouds and just kind of sky color, sunset, and things like that have always been one of my favorites to paint. Okay, now for the moment of truth. I just used one of my weeding tools to remove all of my vinyl once my paint had dried completely, and I was extremely careful while I was using that tool. Of course, I didn't want to poke any holes in my canvas, so it did take just a little bit to try to get that underneath some of these vinyl pieces. But this was practicing my patience, you guys, so I just worked very, very carefully and took my time with this part of the process and just peeled back all of that vinyl, and I got really good crisp lines. So I'm very glad that I put down that layer of white acrylic paint first. I think that worked really well for this project. And of course, I just removed everything that was in vinyl, and I only had one small area where the paint did kind of bleed through a little bit. Now back to my dowel rods. I just measured out what length I would need to apply these as a frame on that outer portion of my canvas, and I just used my miter shears to cut that down. I wish I had a miter box because these are thicker dowels, so it was a little hard for me. My hands, I don't have the strength in my hands like I used to, so I did just kind of have to press down firmly, rotate that dowel rod, and press again until I had all of my pieces cut out that I would need as the frame for my canvas. And I used my sanding block and just sanded down all of those rough edges. And I used some of my antique wax from Waverly and a baby wipe, and I just stained all of my dowel rods. And in the beginning, I did think about just leaving these that natural color because I thought it complemented all of the colors well on my canvas, but I decided to go ahead and stain these and have just a little bit darker contrast. And I took this out to our garage, and my husband helped me apply that to my frame, and this one is finished. I love all of these colors, and it just says fall to me, especially with that bright blue sky and all of these falling leaves. Is this something that you guys would try? That wraps up our last video with fall DIYs. I hope you guys will consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Please give this video a thumbs up and let me know which of these projects is your favorite in the comments. And I have a very special video planned for next week. It will be a Halloween dupes video with a little bit of a vintage vibe. So be sure you don't miss that one, and Christmas videos will be starting soon. I am so excited about those. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I will see you in the next one.